Valentine's Day is just around the corner, but I am disappointed to see that many special dishes have been replaced by takeout and store-bought chocolates. So, I thought I'd bring back forgotten Valentine's Day recipes that are truly worth falling for again. In European culinary history, rose-flavored sweets symbolized love, luxury, and even royalty. Ancient Romans used rosewater in their feasts, believing it enhanced passion. By the Victorian era, candied rose petals topped elegant confections, making their way into romantic dinners. But today, this fragrant tradition has nearly vanished from American kitchens. Take Panna Cotta. This silky Italian dessert once had a romantic twist, a gentle infusion of rosewater, topped with delicate sugared petals. While modern Valentine's treats focus on chocolate overload, earlier generations understood the power of subtlety. So why did this floral delight disappear? One reason: artificial flavors took over. As mass-produced sweets dominated the market, the delicate art of infusing desserts with floral essences faded. Another culprit was changing palates. American desserts became richer, sweeter, and more visually extravagant, leaving subtle flavors behind. And let's be honest, candied rose petals don't exactly scream convenience. Unlike a boxed chocolate assortment, they require patience and precision. But perhaps that's the charm. In an age of instant everything, maybe it's time to revisit the romance of slow, intentional cooking. By the mid-20th century, rich, layered confections took center stage, and nothing captured the spirit of romance quite like the combination of chocolate and raspberries. It wasn't just personal preference. There was science behind it. Chocolate contains compounds that stimulate endorphins, while raspberries add a tart contrast that enhances sweetness without overwhelming the palate. For decades, layered mousse parfaits were a restaurant-style showstopper. The contrast of smooth, airy chocolate and vibrant raspberry compote made for a dessert that was as balanced as it was beautiful. But despite its popularity in mid-century cookbooks and fine dining menus, this elegant treat slowly faded from homemade Valentine's traditions. What happened was that convenience won. As boxed cake mixes and pre-made puddings became household staples, the labor-intensive nature of mousse lost its appeal. Making a proper chocolate mousse requires precise tempering and careful folding, skills that don't come with a microwave shortcut. Maybe it's time to bring back the romance of a carefully crafted bite. No instant pudding required. Fine dining wasn't always reserved for restaurant reservations. Decades ago, ambitious home cooks brought luxury to their own tables, and nothing symbolized extravagance quite like lobster. Once considered a working-class food, lobster transformed into a high-end delicacy by the early 20th century. By the 1950s, Lobster Thermidor was a showpiece for special occasions, especially Valentine's Day. The combination of tender lobster, rich bechamel sauce, Dijon mustard, and a golden cheese crust made it an opulent centerpiece for two. But as indulgent as it was, this dish didn't survive the decades unscathed. The reason was its complexity, and Lobster Thermidor isn't a quick fix. It demands precise timing, multiple cooking steps, and an appreciation for the art of sauce making. Not exactly a weeknight meal. Then there's the price tag. Lobster wasn't always the luxury item we know today, but overfishing and demand turned it into one. By the 1980s, home cooks were trading in labor-intensive seafood dishes for more accessible proteins. And let's be honest, cracking shells and carefully stuffing lobster halves isn't quite as convenient as ordering a steak. Still, for those willing to put in the effort, Lobster Thermidor remains one of the most decadent ways to celebrate love. What better way to declare love than with a dish literally shaped like a heart? By the mid-20th century, creative home cooks were turning classic dishes into symbols of romance, and wrapping salmon in golden puff pastry was one way to impress. Salmon en croute, essentially the French take on a Wellington, was the perfect balance of elegance and comfort. The combination of flaky pastry, creamy, dill-infused filling, and tender fish made it a standout for special occasions. And in true mid-century fashion, shaping it into a heart added an extra touch of flair. But as food trends shifted, so did our definition of romantic meals. By the 1990s, heavier, buttery dishes fell out of favor as lighter seafood preparations became more popular. Add to that the growing preference for quick, no-fuss meals, and suddenly rolling out pastry and carefully crimping edges didn't seem worth the effort. Yet, for those who appreciate the lost art of cooking with a bit of drama, this dish deserves a revival. After all, if love is worth celebrating, shouldn't dinner be just as memorable? Decades ago, a romantic meal wasn't complete without an elegant appetizer to set the tone. And in the world of sophisticated starters, shrimp cocktail reigned supreme. By the 1960s, this dish wasn't just an option. It was an expectation at fine dining establishments and home dinner parties alike. But some home cooks took it a step further, giving the classic seafood starter a festive twist by marinating the shrimp in pink champagne. It wasn't just for show. There was a logic to it. The natural sweetness of shrimp pairs beautifully with the crisp acidity of champagne, while citrus added a bright, refreshing contrast. It was light, luxurious, and, most importantly, effortlessly chic. So why did this bubbly seafood creation disappear? Simplicity became its downfall. By the 1980s, appetizers were getting more elaborate, and the subtle elegance of marinated shrimp started losing ground to fried, stuffed, and heavily sauced alternatives. Plus, champagne, once reserved for special occasions, became more of an everyday indulgence, making its presence in recipes feel less novel. Still, there's something undeniably romantic about a dish that combines elegance with ease. Few flavors are as tied to Valentine's Day as red velvet. It's rich, decadent, and undeniably festive. But its origins go back much further than most people realize. During the early 20th century, cocoa powder was sometimes processed with vinegar to enhance color and texture, creating cakes with a naturally reddish hue. By the 1950s, food coloring took over, turning red velvet into a visual showstopper, perfect for romantic occasions. And what happens when you combine red velvet's signature flavor with another classic, cheesecake? You get a dessert that's as indulgent as it is nostalgic. Swirling tangy cream cheese into fudgy brownies balanced sweetness with a touch of sophistication. Recipes like this became popular in mid-century cookbooks, offering a dessert that felt elegant without requiring the skill of a pastry chef. But as the years went on, dessert trends shifted. By the 2000s, red velvet had gone mainstream, showing up in everything from cupcakes to lattes. Its once special charm got lost in the wave of mass production. And with bakeries offering quick, ready-made options, the art of homemade Valentine's treats started fading. Still, few desserts feel as festive or as shareable. Because if love is all about balance, what better symbol than a brownie that's both rich and tangy? Savory dishes have always had a place in Valentine's Day celebrations, even if desserts tend to steal the spotlight. In mid-century America, a romantic meal wasn't complete without a carefully crafted pastry dish, and tarts fit the bill. With their delicate crusts and rich fillings, they offered elegance without requiring the grandeur of a multi-course feast. Tomato and basil, a combination rooted in Mediterranean cuisine, brought both vibrancy and depth to these creations. Tomatoes were once considered an aphrodisiac, earning them the nickname love apples in 16th century Europe. Paired with aromatic basil and a velvety cream base, they turned a simple tart into something special. For Valentine's Day, these dishes were often shaped into hearts or decorated with carefully arranged tomato slices for an extra romantic touch. So why don't we see these savory tarts on modern Valentine's menus? For one, trends shifted toward either indulgent desserts or high-protein entrees, leaving little room for in-between dishes. Additionally, the rise of fast, grab-and-go meals made from scratch pastry feel like a lost art. For centuries, knots have symbolized love and commitment. In medieval Europe, young couples exchanged knotted cords as a sign of devotion. Some historians even trace the phrase "tying the knot" back to these traditions. So it's no surprise that home bakers once embraced the symbolism, crafting soft pretzels into love knots for Valentine's Day. Pretzels themselves have an old-world charm dating back to monks in the 7th century who shaped dough to resemble folded arms in prayer. But by the 20th century, they had taken on a sweeter side. Home cooks dipped them in cinnamon sugar, drizzled them with honey, or, in true Valentine spirit, served them with warm chocolate for a romantic touch. The contrast of salty and sweet made them an unexpected but perfect addition to the holiday table. So why did this charming tradition fade? Simplicity took over. The rise of store-bought chocolates and prepackaged sweets meant fewer people were willing to knead, twist, and bake homemade dough. And in a world where Valentine's treats became all about visual appeal, pretzels, no matter how lovingly shaped, couldn't compete with glossy heart-shaped confections. But for those who appreciate the beauty of handcrafted traditions, Love-Knot pretzels prove that some of the best Valentine's treats don't come in a box. They're made by hand, one twist at a time. Sweet and savory combinations have long been a hallmark of special occasion cooking. In early American kitchens, pairing fruit with meat was tradition. From cranberry glazed poultry to apple-stuffed pork, the balance of rich and tangy flavors was a sign of culinary refinement. By the mid-20th century, cherry-based sauces became a popular way to elevate pork, adding a touch of elegance to home-cooked meals. Cherries, often associated with indulgence, have had a long history in romantic cuisine. In ancient Rome, they symbolized Venus, the goddess of love. Balsamic vinegar, with its deep, complex flavor, has roots in Italian culinary tradition dating back nearly 1,000 years. Together, they created a glaze that was both luxurious and surprisingly simple to make. So why did this dish fade from the Valentine's Day menu? Blame changing tastes and convenience. By the late 20th century, home cooks were gravitating toward quicker, less labor-intensive meals. Glazes and reductions required patience, and with the rise of pre-marinated meats, the art of balancing flavors from scratch started disappearing. For generations, baking was one of the most heartfelt ways to celebrate love. Before store-bought chocolates and prepackaged treats became the norm, Valentine's Day desserts were made from scratch, often with simple, comforting ingredients, and few things felt as personal as hand pies, small, portable pastries designed to be shared, gifted, or enjoyed together. In the 19th century, vanilla was considered a luxurious ingredient, often associated with warmth and affection. When combined with silky custard and tucked inside a flaky pastry, it created a dessert that was both elegant and nostalgic. The finishing touch was a glossy pink glaze, adding just enough color to make these little pies feel extra festive. So why don't we see these charming pastries on Valentine's tables today? One reason is convenience. As pre-made desserts flooded grocery store shelves, the time-consuming process of rolling, filling, and sealing dough became less appealing. Plus, as chocolate took over as the default Valentine's flavor, vanilla-based treats lost their spotlight. For centuries, fruit-based desserts were considered the height of sophistication. Long before sugar was widely available, natural sweetness came from ripe fruit, often enhanced with honey, wine, or aromatic spices. By the 19th century, poached pears had become a staple of European fine dining, delicate, fragrant, and effortlessly elegant. Amaretto, with its deep almond notes, brought an added layer of warmth and complexity. Originating in Italy, this liqueur has been tied to romance for generations, with legends tracing its origins to a secret love affair in the Renaissance. Paired with silky whipped mascarpone, it transformed a simple pear into a luxurious Valentine's treat, one that felt indulgent without being overly heavy. So why did this dessert fade from home kitchens? Blame the rise of instant gratification. Poaching requires patience, simmering fruit slowly until it reaches the perfect tenderness. But as desserts became more about convenience and visual spectacle, delicate flavors like this were pushed aside for richer, bolder alternatives. Chocolate, with its immediate appeal, dominated Valentine's menus, while fruit-based dishes became more of a rarity. Steak has long been a staple of romantic dinners, but mid-century home cooks weren't just grilling, they were experimenting. By the 1960s, culinary influences from Europe and Latin America introduced the idea that steak didn't need to be seasoned only with salt and pepper. Enter cocoa and espresso, two ingredients that, when used carefully, enhance the natural umami of beef with depth and smokiness. Cocoa in savory dishes wasn't new. Mexican cuisine had been using chocolate in mole for centuries. Espresso, with its rich bitterness, amplified the complexity. Together, they formed a crust that was bold, aromatic, and undeniably elegant. Perfect for a Valentine's dinner at home, it was a dish designed to impress. So why did this flavor combination fade? Timing played a role. As the 1980s and 90s ushered in a preference for ultra-rich, butter-basted steaks, the idea of adding cocoa and coffee seemed almost unnecessary. Meanwhile, the rise of pre-marinated cuts made homemade rubs less common in everyday cooking. But food trends are cyclical, and this is one worth reviving. After all, steak is already a classic Valentine's dish. Why not give it a touch of culinary artistry? Savory pastries have always been a mark of refined entertaining. While desserts often dominate Valentine's Day, elegant appetizers once played just as important a role. In the mid-20th century, small, handcrafted tarts filled with rich, tangy cheeses were a staple at romantic dinners and cocktail parties alike. They were a way to start a meal with sophistication, bite-sized, decadent, and just enough to whet the appetite. Goat cheese, with its creamy texture and slight tang, was a natural choice. Though commonly associated with French cuisine, it gained popularity in the U.S. during the 1960s, as Americans developed a taste for more artisanal dairy products. Pink peppercorns, often mistaken for true pepper, added a floral heat, while honey balanced the sharpness. The result was a tart that was bold, delicate, and undeniably gourmet. So why aren't these little bites still a Valentine staple? One reason is shifting food trends. By the late 20th century, cheese boards replaced carefully crafted cheese tarts, offering the same flavor profile with less effort. At the same time, home entertaining changed. Fewer people were making intricate appetizers from scratch. Light, airy, and effortlessly elegant, fruit-based creams have been a fixture of European desserts for centuries. The fool, a simple combination of crushed fruit and whipped cream, dates back to 16th century England, where it was traditionally made with gooseberries. Over time, variations emerged, with strawberries becoming a popular choice, especially for Valentine's Day, when their vibrant red color and natural sweetness made them a symbol of romance. By the mid-20th century, American home cooks embraced this no-bake dessert as a sophisticated alternative to heavier puddings and cakes. A spoonful offered the perfect contrast: luscious whipped cream, bright strawberries, and the delicate crunch of toasted almonds. It was indulgence without excess, a dessert meant to be savored rather than devoured. But as convenience foods took over, simple classics like this fell out of favor. Instant pudding, canned whipped topping, and pre-made pastries made from scratch desserts seemed like more effort than they were worth. And with the rise of ultra-decadent Valentine's treats, think lava cakes and chocolate truffles, lighter desserts struggled to compete. Still, few things capture romance like a dessert that's both simple and sophisticated. Before filet mignon and lobster took over Valentine's menus, a well-prepared roast was the gold standard for romantic home cooking. It was rustic yet refined, filling the house with warmth and rich aroma. And in the mid-20th century, cooks looking to elevate tradition found a new way to add elegance: honey and lavender. Lavender, long associated with romance and relaxation, has been used in cooking since the Middle Ages. Its floral, slightly citrusy notes paired beautifully with the natural sweetness of honey, creating a glaze that was delicate yet complex. Honey itself has deep romantic symbolism. Once considered an aphrodisiac, it was the namesake of the honeymoon. Together, they turned an ordinary roasted chicken into something worthy of a special occasion. So why did this dish fade from home kitchens? One reason is the changing perception of floral flavors. By the late 20th century, lavender became more associated with soaps and perfumes than with food, making some home cooks hesitant to experiment. At the same time, convenience meals pushed slow-roasted dishes aside in favor of quick, high-heat cooking methods. Homemade pasta has always been a labor of love. Before store-bought options became the norm, rolling, stuffing, and shaping dough by hand was a sign of care and dedication, especially for a romantic meal. Italian cuisine has long embraced ravioli as a special occasion dish, but one variation that once graced Valentine's tables added an unexpected twist: roasted beets. Beets have a long history as a love food. In ancient times, they were believed to boost attraction, and in Victorian England, they were even used to send secret messages between admirers. Their deep red color made them a natural fit for Valentine's Day, while their earthy sweetness paired beautifully with creamy ricotta. Finished with brown butter, a simple yet luxurious sauce, this dish balanced richness with a subtle, nutty depth. So why don't we see this stunning pasta as often today? Time and convenience played a role. Making fresh ravioli from scratch takes patience, and as pre-made pasta became more accessible, fewer home cooks were willing to go through the effort. At the same time, beet-based dishes fell out of fashion, replaced by more mainstream flavors. Delicate, buttery, and elegantly piped sandwich cookies were once a hallmark of refined baking. In mid-century kitchens, these treats weren't mass-produced. They were carefully crafted, often reserved for special occasions like Valentine's Day. Among the most beloved were Viennese whirls, a nod to the fine pastry traditions of Austria, filled with rich buttercream and fruit preserves. Raspberry and almond have long been a classic pairing. Raspberries, with their vibrant tartness, brought contrast to the sweetness of the cookie, while almonds, associated with love and good fortune for centuries, added depth and aroma. The combination was a real sensory experience, from the crisp bite to the melt-in-your-mouth finish. So why did these elegant cookies disappear from Valentine's tables? Part of the reason was convenience. By the late 20th century, store-bought sandwich cookies became the norm, offering sugary fillings with a longer shelf life but less character. At the same time, home baking shifted towards simpler, larger desserts, pushing labor-intensive piped cookies into the background. Yet, few treats feel as special as something homemade, piped by hand, and filled with care. Because sometimes, love is best expressed in the smallest, most thoughtful details. Few dishes strike the balance between comfort and luxury, quite like macaroni and cheese. A staple of American home cooking for over a century, it was originally a simple, affordable meal. But by the mid-20th century, home cooks looking to impress began adding gourmet ingredients, none more decadent than lobster. Lobster itself has had a dramatic culinary evolution. Once considered peasant food, it became a luxury item by the early 1900s, appearing in fine dining menus and special occasion recipes. Combining it with mac and cheese was a statement. The richness of lobster paired with creamy, cheese-laden pasta created a dish that was indulgent but familiar, elevated yet approachable. As lobster became more expensive, its place in home cooking dwindled. At the same time, mac and cheese shifted toward either quick stovetop versions or gourmet truffle-infused restaurant dishes, leaving this mid-century classic in the middle ground. But some flavors deserve a comeback. Because while steak might say fine dining, nothing says thoughtful comfort quite like a perfectly baked dish of mac and cheese, with just enough lobster to remind you it's still a special occasion. For centuries, potatoes have been a symbol of comfort, sustenance, and versatility. But when prepared the right way, they can also be surprisingly elegant. In mid-century kitchens, gratins were a go-to dish for special occasions, combining simple ingredients, potatoes, cream, cheese, and herbs, into something far greater than the sum of its parts. And for Valentine's Day, shaping them into hearts added just the right amount of charm. Gratin itself has deep roots in French cuisine, where layering thinly sliced potatoes with rich cream and baking them to golden perfection was a time-honored tradition. Cheese made it even more decadent, and herbs like thyme and rosemary added a subtle depth. In the 1950s and 1960s, American home cooks embraced the dish, elevating it from everyday fare to dinner party centerpiece. So why did this heart-shaped classic disappear from Valentine's menus? One reason is shifting attitudes toward indulgence. By the late 20th century, heavy cream-based dishes fell out of favor as lighter sides took their place. At the same time, heart-shaped foods, once a playful touch for special occasions, became more associated with store-bought novelties than homemade meals. Delicate, dramatic, and decadent, pavlova has long been a dessert that blends elegance with indulgence. Originating in the early 20th century and named after the Russian ballerina Anna Pavlova, this crisp yet airy meringue became a favorite among dessert lovers who wanted something light but visually striking. By the mid-century, variations emerged, and one particularly romantic twist borrowed flavors from Germany's famous Black Forest cake: chocolate, cherries, and whipped cream. Cherries have long been linked to romance, from ancient mythology to Victorian courting traditions. Their deep red hue and natural sweetness made them a staple in Valentine's desserts. Chocolate, often considered the ultimate aphrodisiac, only added to the appeal. Combined with the crunch of meringue and the softness of fresh whipped cream, this dessert was a showstopper on any special occasion. Pavlova requires patience, slow baking, careful assembly, and just the right balance of textures. By the time instant puddings and no-bake cheesecakes became mainstream, labor-intensive desserts like this fell out of favor. At the same time, Black Forest cake itself became less popular, taking its Pavlova-inspired cousin with it. Effervescent, elegant, and just a little playful, gelatin-based desserts once held a prime spot on Valentine's Day menus. From the Victorian era through the mid-20th century, molded gelée were considered the height of sophistication, appearing at banquets, weddings, and candlelit dinners alike. And when Prosecco entered the mix, this classic treat became even more celebratory. Sparkling wines like Prosecco have long been associated with romance. Their light, crisp bubbles were believed to enhance mood and lift spirits, making them the perfect pairing for strawberries, one of the most iconic love foods in history. The natural sweetness of ripe berries balanced the subtle tartness of the jelly, creating a dessert that was as refreshing as it was luxurious. So why did this shimmering delight disappear? Blame changing tastes. By the late 20th century, elaborate molded desserts were seen as old-fashioned, replaced by richer, more indulgent options. At the same time, Prosecco itself became more common in cocktails than in desserts, and the delicate art of gelée making was left behind in favor of simpler, faster sweets. Rich, indulgent, and undeniably romantic, duck has long been considered a dish reserved for special occasions. Unlike chicken or beef, which became everyday staples, duck retained an air of sophistication, often appearing on Valentine's Day menus as a way to elevate a home-cooked meal. By the mid-20th century, pairing duck with fruit-based sauces was a staple of fine dining. The French had perfected the art with classics like duck à l'orange, but in American kitchens, cherries and port wine offered a deeper, more luxurious alternative. The sweetness of the cherries balanced the richness of the duck, while port, a fortified wine with centuries of culinary history, added a velvety depth to the sauce. It was the kind of dish that felt extravagant yet timeless. Unlike chicken or steak, duck was never as widely available in supermarkets, and its higher price point made it less practical for home cooks. At the same time, the shift towards simpler, quicker meals meant that anything requiring a perfectly seared crust and a carefully reduced sauce became less appealing. When it comes to romance, a dish that's bold, balanced, and just a little indulgent is never out of style. Few aromas are as universally loved as the scent of freshly baked cinnamon rolls. Warm, sweet, and just the right amount of indulgent, they've been a staple of home baking for generations. But in the mid-20th century, Valentine's Day brought a colorful twist: pink velvet cinnamon rolls, a festive variation that combined classic flavors with a striking romantic hue. Cinnamon has long been associated with warmth and passion, its rich spice adding depth to countless baked goods. Meanwhile, red velvet, originally a term for cakes with a naturally soft, velvety crumb, became a culinary icon thanks to food coloring and marketing in the 1950s. Combining the two resulted in a breakfast treat that was as eye-catching as it was delicious. Topped with a tangy cream cheese frosting, these cinnamon rolls were the perfect balance of sweet and spiced, making them a favorite for Valentine's morning. So why did they disappear? Like many homemade breakfast traditions, they fell victim to convenience. By the late 20th century, store-bought cinnamon rolls and prepackaged pastries took over, making labor-intensive baking less common. At the same time, red velvet became so commercialized that its novelty wore off. For decades, mastering the perfect soufflé was considered a mark of true culinary skill. Light, airy, and famously temperamental, these delicate creations were a staple of mid-century fine dining, and for good reason. Few dishes could match their combination of richness and elegance, making them an ideal choice for romantic occasions. Savory soufflés, in particular, had a moment in the spotlight. Cheese, often considered a symbol of indulgence, gave the dish its depth, while thyme, one of the oldest culinary herbs, added an aromatic complexity. Gruyère, a Swiss cheese prized for its nutty, slightly sweet flavor, became the go-to choice, creating a soufflé that was both decadent and refined. For Valentine's Day, serving one straight from the oven was a guaranteed way to impress. Why did soufflés vanish from home kitchens? Blame their reputation for being finicky. By the 1980s, quick, foolproof recipes dominated cookbooks, and soufflés, prone to deflating at the slightest mishap, fell out of favor. At the same time, restaurant trends shifted toward more rustic, hearty dishes, leaving this airy delight behind. Few desserts have as much built-in drama as the molten lava cake. One spoonful, and the warm, velvety center spills onto the plate, a perfect mix of indulgence and spectacle. But while chocolate lava cakes dominated restaurant menus in the late 20th century, their origins go back even further. The idea of underbaking a rich chocolate dessert dates back to French soufflés and fallen chocolate cakes, but by the 1980s, the lava cake became the ultimate fine dining showpiece. Raspberries, naturally tart, cut through the richness of the chocolate, making each bite more balanced. The combination also played on Valentine's Day symbolism. Chocolate as the timeless indulgence, raspberries as the delicate burst of freshness. Together, they created a dessert that was both decadent and refined. By the early 2000s, they had gone from a luxury treat to a chain restaurant staple, losing their sense of exclusivity. At the same time, new dessert trends, from salted caramel everything to gourmet donuts, pushed them to the sidelines. Fondue, a beacon of the 70s dining scene, created memorable moments around pots of melted cheese and chocolate, fostering a unique communal eating experience. Its decline in popularity can be traced back to the end of the fondue party trend, as people sought quicker, less interactive dining experiences due to changing lifestyles. The rise of fast food and ready-to-eat meals emphasized convenience over the communal, leisurely dining experiences fondue provided. Additionally, the health concerns associated with the high-calorie content of cheese and chocolate fondues contributed to its waning popularity, as dietary trends shifted towards lower fat and lower sugar options. Despite this, fondue retains a nostalgic charm and has potential for resurgence with healthier ingredients and innovative dining concepts. Back to the Appalachian region, and this time the Piedmont region as well, a sonker is one of the highlights of Northern Carolina cuisine. It's often served warm with like a generous scoop of ice cream, but it's actually a fruit dessert. These are really popular up in the South, you know? They get very serious about their fruit desserts. It's hard to find out where the dish first originated from, but lots of people believe that farming families that were trying to make the best out of their fruits are the first ones who found it. Actually, a lot of people seem to unanimously agree that it first popped up in Surry County. This is also where it's most well known, so maybe this one has a bit of truth to it. The city of Mount Airy in Surry County is also known for its massive use of sonkers and how it really doesn't ever let up on them. People there make these throughout the year, around the clock, and it's a point of competition for local bakeries too. Surry County even has Sonker Day, which is an annual event that celebrates the dessert. It's this community thing in Pilot Mountain, and people from around the place come and make their best version of a sonker, along with lots of other regional foods that have tons of history. The sonker contest is one of the best things to check out in the area, so if you're ever around, Give it a visit. Not every breakfast dish makes you stop and ask, are we brave enough for this? Deviled kidneys, a bold and flavorful classic, is one such dish. Originating in 19th century England and embraced by American households with British roots, this recipe turns humble lamb kidneys into a fiery, mustard-laced delicacy served atop crisp toast. The term deviled refers to the liberal use of spicy seasonings like mustard, cayenne pepper, and Worcestershire sauce, which were added to mask the strong, earthy flavor of the kidneys. It was a wake-up call for your taste buds. And for those wondering, yes, kidneys were a practical choice. They were affordable, protein-rich, and readily available during times when wasting any part of the animal was unthinkable. In Victorian times, deviled kidneys became a breakfast staple for the adventurous eater, often paired with tea and a stiff upper lip. Some even considered it the perfect cure for a rough morning after a late-night indulgence. After all, when your breakfast bites back, it's hard to dwell on anything else. Deviled kidneys may not top every modern brunch menu, but they remain a testament to the creativity of cooks who knew how to make the most of what they had: spices, toast, and just a touch of daring. Yep, I always say America's really just one big melting pot of bits and pieces from everywhere, from around the world. Duck confit tacos make me think I'm right, because where else does Mexican food meet French cuisine, all for commercial, everyday eating? Yet that's exactly what duck confit tacos are. The tradition of confit itself is something that's been exclusive to France for decades. Basically, you take those juicy duck legs and cook them in duck fat, and that gives you meat that's pretty much ready to fall off of the bone at any given moment. Plus, that flavor is to die for. Now, that naturally makes it the perfect kind of meat for a taco, and most spices and toppings available at taco places, like corn and sour cream, went really well with duck confit tacos. It's not something you'd find at taco joints now, but it used to be one of the most popular tacos to get during the stretch between 2003 and 2007. There was something about the way the 2000s elevated street food into being this actual culinary experience where you could just spend the day roaming the streets, trying new things from new fusion food stalls. It really made the whole decade magical. Harvey Wallbanger Cake, inspired by the cocktail, infused the dessert scene with a unique blend of orange, vodka, and Galliano, offering a spirited, tangy treat. Its decline can be attributed to changing tastes and the proliferation of desserts that incorporate a wider range of flavors and ingredients. The novelty of alcohol-infused cakes has expanded, making the Harvey Wallbanger Cake less distinctive among desserts that feature more complex or exotic alcohol bases. Additionally, the shift towards more natural and health-conscious dessert options has led to a decreased interest in cakes heavily reliant on processed ingredients. Despite this, the cake's distinctive flavors and potential for reinterpretation with higher quality, less processed ingredients could revitalize its appeal in the context of modern culinary trends. Kentucky's Burgoo Fest in Owensboro is actually one of the best things to do in the whole state. The Burgoo Festival is one of the most renowned festivals across the country, and Owensboro itself is known as the Burgoo capital of the world, too. The actual history of the burgoo comes from the 19th century African-American communities that first made this into a southern dish. A lot of them were working in plantations and had to really play clever with their ingredients, and this meant that burgoo was something people couldn't live without. That only got worse when the Civil War rolled around and people started incorporating the recipe into the mainstream due to its ability to feed massive groups of people. The burgoo itself is this really thick and dense stew that has mashed potatoes, chicken, and all kinds of vegetables. You know those little quirks that each state has? The kind of thing that it becomes popular for, that everyone starts recognizing it for? That's basically what this was. Few dishes capture the spirit of thrift and indulgence quite like a warm, wilted lettuce salad. It's a combination that's both practical and unexpectedly decadent. A bed of fresh lettuce, gently softened by a hot bacon fat dressing. If that doesn't sound like a love letter to resourcefulness, what does? This dish traces its roots back to rural American kitchens, where wasting food was unthinkable. When lettuce was abundant and bacon fat was too valuable to discard, clever cooks turned to this ingenious recipe. The heat from the dressing slightly wilts the greens, creating a tender, flavorful base. The addition of crumbled bacon, a splash of vinegar, and sometimes a sprinkle of sugar made it a savory, sweet masterpiece. The magic of this salad lies in its balance. It's humble yet rich, fresh yet comforting. It transformed humble greens into something hearty and satisfying, a rare feat for a salad in those days. Variations of this recipe can be found across different cultures, proving that the idea of combining warm fats with greens is truly universal. In a time when every resource counted, wilted lettuce salad turned a simple garden harvest into a dish worthy of the family table. So if you thought that one wasn't nearly spicy enough for you, this one is, both literally and figuratively. The tandoori salmon burger wasn't just an overload of garam masala and traditional Indian spices. It was also one extremely divisive burger. Grilled salmon marinated in and cooked with tandoori spices, which were typically things like cumin, turmeric, paprika, cayenne, chili flakes, etc., was the key here. Why salmon in specific? Salmon naturally has a pretty low-key flavor, which makes it the perfect canvas for a wonderful blend of seasonings. Still, lots of fans of both sides thought the fusion didn't exactly offer much to the table. People thought that the spices either weren't working in the form of a burger, especially a salmon one, since most Indian American families were used to eating these spices with chicken. Meanwhile, on the Caucasian side of things, people found it pretty hard to tolerate that many spices in their burger, and there was also a bit less cheese than most Americans were used to. German chocolate cake, despite its rich flavor and beloved status, has faced competition from newer, more fashionable desserts that cater to evolving tastes and dietary restrictions. The cake's traditional recipe, which includes a dense, sweet coconut pecan frosting, may not align with current trends toward lighter, less sugary desserts. Additionally, the misconception about its origin, it's American, not German, and the increasing preference for global flavors have also contributed to its reduced prominence in the dessert landscape. Nonetheless, German chocolate cake's decline has not erased its legacy. It remains a nostalgic favorite for many, underscoring the potential for adaptation to today's more health-conscious and flavor-diverse dessert market. During the toughest times in American history, the ability to turn scraps into sustenance was nothing short of a survival skill. Enter the humble yet hearty slumgullion, a stew that thrived on resourcefulness. Born from the need to stretch ingredients, it was often made with whatever was on hand: potatoes, leftover meat, vegetables, and sometimes a dash of seasoning if you were lucky. It was less about following a recipe and more about making do with what you had. The name slumgullion likely originated from 19th century mining camps, where the dish was cobbled together from bits and pieces miners could scavenge. The word itself might have started as slang for something watery or of questionable quality, though anyone who's had a well-made version would argue it's far better than the name suggests. Think of it as the original clean out the fridge meal, but with a lot more soul. It was filling, nutritious, and most importantly, affordable. And if someone complained about what was in it, well, they were promptly reminded that beggars couldn't be choosers. Slumgullion was a testament to the ingenuity and determination of those who faced hardship with a pot, a fire, and a whole lot of grit. A dish born of necessity but remembered for its practicality and heartiness. Now, fusion food isn't all just happy little accidents that end up reshaping our Saturday night menu. It's also things like bacon-wrapped avocado fries, which, despite what you might think, were actually a lot less controversial than people thought they would be. I mean, they even started whipping out bacon avocado cheeseburgers in California, so fries are hardly a stretch. Still, California-style cooking always involved heavy spices and cheese centered around burgers. Bacon was a key part of both that and Tex-Mex cuisines. But where'd avocados come in from? A lot of Americans were getting extremely health-conscious during the 2000s. They started to fear what so many years of McDonald's and Papa John's could do to a prepubescent kid or a dad in his 50s with terrible gut health. More and more obesity cases were on the rise too, and people wanted healthier alternatives, but they wanted to keep the overall format of the food the same. So, these were fries, and in that sense they were pretty familiar, but they were just made out of avocado. To be honest, it worked better than I thought. Would you ever try this, or do you like your fries strictly potato-based? Minnesota's always a place you associate with big families that like to hold even bigger feasts. Naturally, in such a place, dishes that have a lot of crowd-pleasing abilities take first place. Hot dishes, which are a type of casserole, fit that bill perfectly. For the longest time, hot dishes have been a massive part of the comfort food traditions of America. But that couldn't be truer than it is for Minnesota. Ground beef, pasta, peas, green beans, and corn, and the creamiest and cheesiest sauce you know are the tricks to making a good hot dish. And it's something that Minnesotans just can't seem to replace. A lot of people actually seem to think that this love of a hot dish comes from the struggles Minnesota suffered throughout the post-World War II and Great Depression periods. Back then, it was extremely vital that people prepare dishes that could feed entire families with minimal ingredients. As the name implies, it's also pretty hot, which makes it perfect for the winters and for reheating it. Potlucks and casseroles were always something that was really popular in America, especially in Minnesota, and this casserole is textbook proof of that never-ending trend. Bananas Foster, a flamboyant dessert known for its dramatic tableside preparation, has seen a decline due to the decrease in formal dining experiences and the rise of DIY dining trends. The spectacle of flambeing, while impressive, requires a level of skill and safety precautions that may deter home cooks. Additionally, the dessert's reliance on rich ingredients like butter, sugar, and rum contrasts with the growing preference for lighter, fruit-based desserts. The shift towards quick and easy recipes for home entertainment has also contributed to its reduced popularity. Nonetheless, Bananas Foster remains a beloved classic for special occasions, suggesting that with innovative adaptations, it could regain popularity among those seeking to recreate restaurant-quality experiences at home. Some dishes are all about simplicity, and coddled eggs are the perfect example. This soft cooked egg dish is made by gently submerging eggs in hot water, or sometimes using a specialized cup to coddle the egg just below boiling. The result is a delicate, slightly runny egg with a tender white and rich yolk, often served as a luxurious breakfast or a refined addition to a light meal. The term coddling comes from an Old English word meaning to pamper or to treat gently, and this process certainly lives up to the name. Unlike hard boiling, which can leave the yolk dry and chalky, coddling ensures the egg maintains its softness, making it a favorite for those who prefer a gentler approach to cooking eggs. Coddled eggs gained popularity in the 18th and 19th centuries, especially in England, where they were served to those in delicate health as an easily digestible option. Over time, they made their way into American kitchens, often paired with toast or as a topping for vegetables. Some even considered them the ultimate comfort food, offering a satisfying blend of rich flavor and velvety texture. I keep mentioning these food trucks, but it's important to add a bit of context to them. I really don't think things like faux grilled cheese sandwiches would have had the spotlight for any amount of time without them, really. You gotta think about the idea, you know? Ice cream trucks were all the rage, and the entire idea was that there was just literally a truck that went from area to area or was stationed at a specific one. It was magnetic. It attracted people to the food, and it was an excuse to go out instead of ordering takeout. Faux and grilled cheese are both things that really don't go together, though. So how did the combination work exactly? Well, you had to tinker around. It wasn't like they just gave you a bowl of faux and expected you to work with that. They'd often boil the broth and reduce it until the flavors were so concentrated in what was really just a dip at that point that it worked perfectly with the grilled sandwich. Plus, some food trucks had the sandwich incorporate things you would find in faux so that it would go better overall when you'd bite it. Pretty thoughtful, right? Ambrosia Salad, once a staple of festive gatherings, has seen its popularity wane due to its heavy reliance on canned fruits and marshmallows. clashing with modern dietary preferences that favor fresh, unprocessed ingredients. The advent of more sophisticated desserts and salads, which offer complex flavors and textures without excessive sweetness, also contributed to its decline. Additionally, the visual appeal of Ambrosia Salad, with its mix of colorful fruits and marshmallows, no longer captivates in an era where aesthetics in food are increasingly valued but demand a more refined presentation. Despite this, Ambrosia Salad's nostalgic value keeps it in the memories of those who grew up with it, suggesting a possible pathway for reinvention that aligns with contemporary tastes and health considerations. As far as names go, this is probably the most insulting one I've ever seen. But nonetheless, a garbage plate is a Rochester classic, and if you're ever in New York, you'd be doing yourself a disservice by not trying it. Yes, you heard me right, a garbage plate. Not following? I wouldn't blame you. If someone told me to eat that, I'd probably think they were making fun of me. In reality, though, a garbage plate is pretty much just this massive behemoth-sized platter that you can really customize and adjust however you would like. Pasta fan? Throw in some macaroni and homemade fries. Meathead? You can't ever have enough ham, sausages, and chicken. Vegetable addict? Works for everyone. Still, who came up with such a massive display of gluttony? Nick Tahu Hots, which used to be one of the top restaurants in New York in 1918, founded by Nick Tahu, apparently made the dish for the first time. It was his way of giving customers the most bang for their buck and giving them a big meal for an affordable price. Quickly, it became a quintessential part of New York's street food culture and a symbol of the kind of indulgence you'd only find in the streets of New York City. The name itself apparently comes from how it looks, which, well, isn't really flattering. Immigrant ingenuity often gave rise to some of America's most beloved comfort foods, and this one is no exception. Born from German-American kitchens, Goetta is a hearty breakfast staple that combines pork, beef, steel-cut oats, and spices into a savory sausage loaf. Its roots trace back to German immigrants in Cincinnati, Ohio, who adapted their traditional Grützwurst to the ingredients available in their new homeland. Stretching meat with oats made it more affordable while adding a unique, satisfying texture. Families would fry up slices of this loaf to serve alongside eggs, creating a breakfast that was not only filling but economical. Over time, it became a regional specialty, so beloved that it inspired annual festivals like the Glazed Goetta-Fest, celebrating this humble yet delicious creation. Cincinnatians consume over 1 million pounds of Goetta annually. That's enough to make you wonder if oats might secretly be the city's fuel. What sets Goetta apart is its slow-cooked process, which allows the spices to meld with the oats and meat, creating a flavor that's savory, earthy, and utterly distinct. Mango habanero glazed meatballs were one of the nicest ways to have meatballs. It really helps when something just ends up completely revitalizing an old classic, you know? I mean, I love a good cheeseburger, but sometimes I want it served with something new. Maybe some truffles, maybe a new kind of mushroom, maybe it's grilled in a different way. That's exactly the kind of hot new twist that mango habanero glazed meatballs were, and to be honest, I think meatballs as a whole needed it. They got abused to the moon and back as literally every family's dinner throughout the 20th century. Can you imagine how many times a chunk of America has had meatballs for dinner? That's literally the textbook definition of oversaturation. You pair it up with some mango habanero, though, which was a result of people trying out different fruit glazes and getting inspired from dips like chutney, and you actually end up with a pretty good version of the dish. The habanero was the perfect amount of spicy, but the mango countered it with just the right amount of sweet. You also had food trucks and bloggers around the country sharing stuff like this every day, so the interest was going to peak. I mean, YouTube really used to be a source of information back then. Beneath the light and airy embrace of chiffon cake lies a tale of culinary rebellion, where vegetable oil daringly took the place of butter, forever changing the dessert landscape. Its popularity soared post-World War II as ingredients became more readily accessible and the American public craved new, lighter dessert options. However, as culinary trends shifted towards more decadent and visually striking desserts, chiffon cake began to fade from the spotlight. Its simplicity, once a virtue, made it less appealing in an era where complex flavors and elaborate presentation became paramount. Additionally, the health-conscious movement raised concerns about the refined flour and sugar content, pushing it further out of favor despite its lighter texture compared to butter-heavy cakes. Barbecue spaghetti is a Memphis, Tennessee classic, and it takes the best of both worlds. You have barbecue, which is something that Memphis swore long ago that it couldn't live without, and you have spaghetti. Memphis-style barbecue works extremely well with spaghetti because it has a big focus on the smoky and tangy side of things. This barbecue uses a sauce that's made out of marinara and a tomato-based barbecue sauce too, which is a big part of what gives it that smoky flavor. Then, you have your pulled pork and chicken, along with some classics like bell peppers and garlic, which give the dish its finishing touches as far as flavor is concerned. Despite its status as a regional classic, this is really just a new dish that only recently made its name in the Memphis food scene. It wasn't always there, but what was a big and ancient part of Memphis tradition is barbecuing. You could just consider this another successful experiment in that long-lasting tradition. It's originally believed that African American communities came up with barbecue spaghetti, and it was probably a way to get rid of leftover meat. Since there probably wasn't enough to constitute a full plate, people would often mix it with any kind of grain or starch to get a full meal. With a history so rich, some recipes seem almost woven into the fabric of a region. Anadama bread is one such recipe, a hearty New England classic made from a combination of cornmeal and molasses. The story goes that the bread was named after a frustrated wife named Anna, who, in a moment of exasperation, would mutter, "Anna, damn her," as she baked the bread for her family. Whether or not the tale is true, it certainly adds a touch of character to the dish. The bread itself, dense and slightly sweet, became a staple in New England kitchens. The cornmeal provides a hearty base, while the molasses adds a deep sweetness that balances the grainy texture. It's not a light, airy loaf, it's a substantial bread, perfect for pairing with savory dishes or simply slathering with butter. Interestingly, while Anadama bread is often associated with New England, it is spread across the United States, with variations appearing in places like Pennsylvania and even the Midwest. Over time, it became a symbol of comfort and practicality, reflecting the region's commitment to using locally sourced ingredients and making the most of what was available. Chimichanga sushi rolls are a weird one. You take fried chimichanga, which is pretty much a national Mexican treasure, and you pair it up with sushi rolls, which are pretty much a Japanese national treasure. It was something that was meant to capture an audience with both, but I'm not really too sure if it ever did that. This entire trend of sushi rolls being turned into these new quirky dishes had a lot of hits and misses, really. During the 2000s, it became a lot more common to have sushi, much more than it ever used to be. However, there were demands for more variety and newer kinds of sushi. Eventually, people got bored of just having a California roll or a tuna roll every time they had a sushi craving. Things like chimichanga sushi rolls definitely did help alleviate that issue, but did they really work as well as we'd like to remember? Lots of people would disagree and instead have the opinion that this was pretty unnecessary. There are also loads of fans of what I can best describe as a tangy and overall tangy, spicy, and really crunchy experience. Think spicy mayo and chipotle aioli in a crispy tortilla. Is that something you'd give a fair shot to? Grasshopper Pie, minty and bright, offered a refreshing departure from traditional desserts, captivating with its vibrant green hue and creamy texture. Its decline can largely be attributed to changing dessert trends that favor less artificially colored and flavored options. The rise of culinary sophistication has seen a shift towards desserts that highlight natural ingredients and artisanal craftsmanship, leaving behind those with a reliance on food coloring and pre-made mixes. Furthermore, the pie's association with retro dining trends makes it less appealing in a market that constantly seeks the next innovative dessert. Despite this, Grasshopper Pie's unique flavor profile and potential for a more natural ingredient-based revival could reintroduce it to a new audience looking for a blend of nostalgia and modernity. So lasagna soup is really as Italian as it gets. It was one of the most common recipes to make when people were coming out of the Depression, because it was extremely comforting and warm. It involved basically the entire blueprint of a lasagna, the pasta, meat, and vegetables, and yes, the unholy amounts of tomato sauce, but it was all in soup form. This dish was something people really treasured both for its taste and how easy it became to prepare it thanks to modern progressions in cooking appliances. You didn't have slow cookers that were half this good back in the 50s and 60s. One of the best reasons to make this dish was that it offered you a lot of nutrition for almost nothing. You could make this using leftovers, random scraps, or even vegetables that are different from what you typically order. This helps keep the soup fresh each time you make it, while also ensuring that it becomes your go-to for a health boost. Who wouldn't want that? Personally, I think the Italians really cracked the code on all this healthy eating stuff. What about you? Would you consider keeping lasagna soup as a side dish in your roster? Or are you a purist who swears there's nothing better than the classic layered, cheesy lasagna? Let us know in the comments below which one of these romantic recipes will you be making this year. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.